Bolsonaro's conviction came out overnight, and he's been convicted of attempting a coup and leading an armed criminal group after losing the last election, facing a 27-year prison sentence. I thought it said 40 at one point. And he's also he's under house arrest with another prosecution underway. Now, articles from the BBC and the ABC and other places are saying basically he's some right-wing extremist who, because Trump likes him, is therefore really, really bad for Brazil. Yet none of the articles cover the assassination attempt against him, where he basically got filleted with a knife. The fact that he was unhappy with the over-reliance on electronic voting systems, because he felt that the chain of trust cannot be maintained as easy as it can with paper ballots, and therefore it's too easy to influence the outcome. And I mean, that was a large part of the complaint about electronic voting systems in the US as well, a lot of which being owned and operated by the same company. And yet people looked away from that because, well, they felt the results they were getting were the results that they deserved, and therefore it was all good because it was giving them the political win. And so, because he's sort of because he was a polarizing character like Trump as well, I guess, the media obviously didn't like him. There are people who are very unhappy with anything he did, and basically saying that, now that he's been convicted, it's a closure to the process. People who looked from the outside might have been concerned about the use of lawfare, as it's called sometimes, as a means to engage in suppression of thought, to engage in political suppression. People say, that's just a new thing. Well, before Trump got re-elected, there was the numerous cases that were brought against him using laws that either never existed, were being very, very selectively interpreted, and were basically overturned an appeal, or were written just to target him, and underwent a whole range of lawfare against him and also against some of his supporters. Now, some of them, people overstepped their bounds and deserved to be prosecuted for what they did. Others, it was a political targeting. And people argue that this is what happened here, particularly after he was nearly assassinated, and purely because he represented a more, I guess, conservative position, a more capitalist position, etc. I mean, there's plenty of other examples of lawfare being used to suppress political positions. There's the recent dismissal of the Thai Prime Minister based on a leaked phone call from her Myanmar, of a leaked phone call where she was on the phone with her Myanmar counterpart, and suspicion about who released it. But that's just indicative of political instability within Thailand. It's not necessarily alleged that it was done to specifically target her. During Mahathir Mohamad's rule in Malaysia, the judicial system was quite frequently used to suppress the specific individuals, and I mean, there may have been elements that they were politicians. Pretty much everyone regards them as having issues, but it was used as a means to suppress the opposition, and target specific individuals to keep them out of the political sector, etc. So the fact that Bolsonaro was taken to court in such a way when even the articles admit that historically it it didn't happen that way. Like if there were issues like that, people were largely um, dismissed and left alone. And there are protests in both directions and stuff like that. But the narrative being fed to people was that Bolsonaro's supporters were basically violent people seeking to overthrow the country. Well, when you control the media, you can say what you want. And obviously they're trying to paint connections between that and January 6, 2021, at least to the narrative of January 6, 2021, whereas, again, if you look at the actual evidence to fall out of the day and not what the media said, the reality is either somewhat tempered down or somewhat opposite. But we're not talking about that. I mean, Lula da Silva, I mean, there's allegations he wanted to assassinate him and assassinate his opposition and other bits and pieces. Well, the only person who's actually had physical damage, again, is Bolsonaro when someone tried to gut him with a knife. And it's somewhat interesting. And one of the named characters here, Supreme Court Judge Alexandra de Moraes, was then involved in the prosecution or sitting in judgment on him. And it's like, well, uh, it seems that evidence is sketchy at best. But no, it doesn't matter. It makes people worried about kangaroo courts, about judicial overreach, about it being used to punish a political opponent, and whether the judicial processes are fair. And, well, they've painted themselves a picture where, oh no, Bolsonaro is this horrible creature who's going to bring us back to a dictatorship, and, well, not a military coup because he's not military, but it's going to be a dictatorship again. He's going to suppress people. It's like the rhetoric you hear about Trump's going to execute every gay person in the country. The same sort of people are saying those same sort of things. Anyway. And it's, again, Alexander, statements, it's like, it's, it nearly returned to a dictatorship because a criminal organization comprised of a political group doesn't know how to lose elections. That's nowhere near, well, that's an influential statement, well, very influential, I guess. That carries a lot of baggage. It's a statement that carries a lot of baggage, and so okay, he's going to follow. He's going to likely get a jail sentence, etc. And but the question is, all right, left-leaning media basically hiding the effect of what Bolsonaro did, etc. Basically taking a very narrow reading on what's going on, and that was a little bit different. Huh. We're back. We are back. Okay. But as you read a little bit deeper, okay, yep. Well, the ABC says he's actually been sentenced. Okay, we're near the end. I'm not going to unplug and replug the capture card just yet. We'll just deal with the colours being off. That it's a powerful blow to the populist far-right movement. this is throwing out terminology that, well, basically leftists throw out, that anything to the right of them that's popular is bad, that populism is bad. It's like, well, I thought the idea of a democratic process, the idea of representation for the masses, is that power goes to the popular, goes to those that the people support. That you can't take power without popular support. And so the idea that you've got populist as a negative term, well, that's just suggesting that you're trying to be authoritarian in retaining power and dismissing the will of the people because it doesn't align with your desires. Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah. Okay. I mean, they've said he's organised a coup. I don't know that. Again, I've not seen the depth of the evidence. It's yeah, a witch hunt, kangaroo court. Eh. Now, why am I saying that this sort of stuff? Well, because there is a clear. You talk about the corruption that Bolsonaro allegedly involved in. You've got to look at what De Silva and the people running the prosecution or ruling on the prosecution have to say in things. So, all right, so he's pretty right wing. Bolsonaro was, but maybe that upset people. So it was close. De Silva won, and people were like, eh. And yeah, it's frustrating because, in fact, no, that we were going to look at that. I'm not going to look at that. So yep, again, he's been. The articles all cover pretty much the same stuff, and the comments that tend to follow fall in line with the article and basically slamming Bolsonaro as being evil incarnate. Now, this guy over here, that's Alexandra de Moraes, who I believe is the head judge, um, chief justice, or whatever they call it in Brazil. He's certainly the one who seems to have a lot more political, or well, a lot more exposure in as his role. People know who he is more than anything else. So I mean, here we go. Lula was involved in a bribery scandal. That, well, it's. I mean, I get that people say it's the system over there is not clean, but we look at Alexandre de Moraes again. I get the colours off. I will unplug and replug the capture card later. Okay, so he's appointed as the to the Justice of the Supreme Federal Court. His past, though, and this is coming from Wikipedia, which is going to lean left as well. He was previously a Minister of Justice and Citizenship. He was he held Secretary of Public Security in Sao Paulo, Secretary of Transport, Secretary of Justice, etc. Okay, so he's been a politician as well. So his political alignment is that, well, Moraes has been accused of practicing nepotism, political interference, political repression, abuse of power, and deploying a constitutional dictatorship. Glenn Greenwald, who traditionally was a leftist commentator, has targeted that as well. Elon Musk doesn't like him very much, and Moraes has went to suspend that as well. The he was previously known for conservative views and economic issues and support for tougher measures fighting crime. Not so much. He was, well, he's described as a centrist, but the political party that he was associated with was the Brazilian Social Democracy Party, okay, PSDB. He faced criticism when he was holding those roles in Sao Paulo about his management was, so here we go, his management was controversial. He was accused of covering up police violence. 1 out of every 4 homicides in Sao Paulo at the time were committed by police. In addition, Moraes sent armoured vehicles to suppress left-wing demonstrations. Um, uh, As minister, he claims to defend a policy of zero tolerance. He denounced the alleged criminal attitudes of leftist movements and justified police violence. He was at the centre of another controversy when the Brazilian newspaper published an investigation claiming that it intervened to defend Trans Cooper Cooperative, suspected of being linked to Brazil's main drug trafficking group, which he denied. Uh, and basically proceeded up. There was uh, yeah, it's odd what he gets in or has been involved with. But what's the Brazilian Social Democracy Party? Apparently, they're now centrist, centre right, but they were left leaning in the past. But they've had some. They were certainly started as a leftist party, and obviously Moraes was involved and active during the 90s. There you go, not long after it was formed, and they looked at basically European social democracies as a model for going forward. Try to, I guess, bring groups together. It looks like they're not holding a lot of power at the moment in terms of their numbers, but it's not as far left as some of the other parties in Brazil, but there are um, uh, allegations of corruption and yeah, it's whilst Moraes has said that he's centrist to slightly right-leaning, it would look like he's doesn't have very clean hands having come through the system, and he's certainly attracted controversy. Certainly well before the Bolsonaro case. Will this stand? I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. The reading of the tea leaves beforehand was that it is a politically motivated attempt to silence Bolsonaro through lawfare. I think that's still probably the observation. Clearly, Bolsonaro has his own skeletons in the closet, and has certainly been a hardliner in the past as he was working his way up through the system. And certainly, De Silva doesn't have a clean hands either. And I mean, I don't see Brazil swinging back necessarily. It just seems that Brazil's got a very messy political system at the moment. But then Argentina was sort of perceived to have been almost a failed state there for a little while because of its difficulty, um, well, inability to maintain a currency that anyone wanted, which made its currency next to worthless. But Javier, I think that's how you pronounce it, Milei, and I think that's how you pronounce that too, seems to have done a pretty good job overturning it, reversing the path down there. And there's certainly other cases up through Central America where nations that looked like they were headed down the path, not just to irrelevancy, but were going to struggle to remain economically viable, have certainly turned things around. So, I mean, there's hope yet that Brazil will settle down at some point, but it certainly looks like there's some endemic problems that are going to take a while to be resolved.